I feel like it's been a while since I did this main topic as a main topic, but considering that the amount of real world experience doesn't necessarily translate to you being better, doesn't make this any easier or harder. Either way, I feel like it is something that needs to be talked about. So, this episode is going to revolve around dating. Although considering that I have a little bit of a dick story that I need to start with, and both of them have a D, this episode comes with double Ds, which I honestly couldn't find a nicer way to describe what I'm supposed to talk about in this episode. I'm sorry. Like, this is all that I have to work with. But, then again, I do intend on making it particularly good. So let me start things off by getting rid of the not so clean stuff first. All right, so the hip hop artist slash entrepreneur slash weed smoker known as Snoop Dogg was being interviewed on an Instagram live where he mentioned that he turned down an OnlyFans deal while they told him that he could make up to $100 million just to quote unquote pull that thing out. And I'm about to call this a lie. It's just that considering those of us that know about the weird rumor that was being thrown around like 10-15 years ago, it might actually be true, because for some people, the thought of actually seeing it to confirm might actually be something that they've been wanting to do for many, many years. But before I can talk about his, let me start by cleansing my own, so...
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Now, according to Snoop Dogg himself, he actually did come out to say that because he's got a black wife, there's no way in the world that she's going to allow him to get onto OnlyFans to do such a thing, even though there's $100 million on the line. And the interesting part about it was, a lot of the women who were commenting on this entire story were giving some very, very wild takes about the entire thing, which I'll get to in a little bit. Because first of all, there was a rumor a couple of years back, quite a number of years back, where people used to talk about how apparently Snoop Dogg had a double-digit dick size. In inches, I mean. Not that I really cared too much about it, I just found it to be particularly wild, because at that time I was like in my early teens, and as usual, if you're a guy, you probably know about the whole like constantly like random boners that just pop up when you're just hitting puberty and adolescence and shit. And I was busy dealing with that shit. So I was busy wondering if this guy would wrap that shit around his leg, or if he had like a special place that he'd put it so that he doesn't get random boners. Because I thought that if I was getting random boners in my early teens, this guy must be suffering as a fully grown adult. Because me with like my 1.5 inch, like it's like everyone is seeing it at any point in time, because that's when I'm being called to go and solve equations on the blackboard, which requires me to stand up. But that said, I always did find it very weird that people were talking about it and yet we didn't have any real particular proof on the entire thing. And the weird part was that it was actually a lot of guys who were talking about it, not even the women. But today, I feel like the more interesting part is the comments, because a lot of women were hopping on there and they were busy talking about how, he used to show it to other women for free when he was cheating, blah, blah, blah. And the entire time I'm looking at these comments and I'm wondering, like, do people actually understand the difference between putting your private parts on camera for money versus going to actually cheat on your partner? Because, to be honest, I think it's mostly that a lot of people have kind of become desensitized to the whole idea of online sex work through OnlyFans, because it seems like a more mainstream thing for a lot of people. But the reality of it is, it's not that it's actually a good thing. And also, sex isn't something that is particularly well valued when you look at it in terms of money, because its main currency to deal with is usually more dignity than it is financial. Because at the end of the day, like, you can make $1 million selling, like nudes and doing like online sex work through OnlyFans, but the kind of dignity drop that you get on a social level means that it kind of messes you up socially in terms of getting a partner and stuff like that. It's not even about the money. You could have the $1 million, or even in Snoop Dogg's case, 100 million, but the kind of dignity drop just by doing it, because it is technically sex work, means that you actually lose even though you still gain $100 million. Although, then again, I could be wrong about this shit, and, maybe it's because I haven't been offered that money to put my thing on the internet. So I'm just going to leave it at that and begin the podcast with a little bit more pizzazz, a lot less of a dick, allegedly speaking, and possibly a better tone by saying, Welcome to the Breaktime Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who believes that it's the little things that matter, except for food, because, that one I prefer in big portions and, other things. But, it's the little things that matter. He's a man who believes that astrology should have been the study of ass. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This is possibly one of the weirdest beginnings that I've started with. Not because it's something that's completely out of this world, but just because I started by talking about dick. Normally I don't talk about it. It's not really my business to think of another man's manhood, but considering that it was being valued at a possible $100 million, I figured that if it's not made of gold, then maybe we should wonder what it is that would make it that valuable. But all in all, thank you so much for choosing to listen to the podcast. If you do want to hit me up on social media, the links are usually in the description below. And if you're enjoying the podcast or this episode, then a nice rating and or review would be highly appreciated. And if you'd like to send me topics, then you can send them through the socials and I will be more than happy to take them and handle them accordingly. Now, I do want to get into the whole talks about dating, but I want to start things off by talking about one aspect of being an attractive person to women, which would either facilitate for better dates or just, seeming like a more attractive man. And for me to talk about it properly, I need to first let a video clip play where a guy was busy talking about one dating tip that you can use to impress a woman and works with almost all women. So let me just let the clip play for a little bit. So without further ado,
I would say that if you want to impress a woman, you make a plan. The list of things that are hot for women has a great job that he's passionate about. Is tall and confident in who he is as a person. Makes plans.
Yeah.
Makes plans might trump all those other
or
things.
is down to do my plans.
That's not hot.
You don't think that's hot?
That's beta bull.
Okay. How is it beta?
It's nice. They appreciate it, but they clock. They love plans. Women so much that they clock when you're just going along with their plans. If you throw out a plan for them, that's when they go to the group chat that they're on with the girls and say, I can't Friday nights. I'm busy. Mark made a reservation for us to go to the aquarium and then to this beautiful dinner. And the girls go, we didn't even ask you what you're doing, but oh my God, Congratulations.
Man with a plan.
The man with the plan. I love that. The app that should be next to Hinge and Bumble should be Resi.
Yeah.
That should be all in the same category.
okay, so according to this guy, a man with a plan is a very attractive man, and women usually like that and they look for that in a man. And unfortunately, for some guys that are about to start refuting this or expect me to be like, no, this is bullshit, I can't say that it is. Like, being a guy that has a plan or makes particularly good plans is actually something that actually makes you more attractive to more women. And this is something that I noticed with a lot of women today. It's just that they don't necessarily say makes plans. They'll use other terms like is intentional because, they like an intentional man. They'll say that they want an intentional man. But planning is actually a particularly good thing. Now, of course, there are caveats to this and I'll get to them. But for the most part, for a lot of guys today, you actually sort of check how they intend on taking a woman out on a date or how they intend on dating a woman. And you can hear a lot of times it's like they didn't really plan things out. They don't really have some sort of a plan. Now, of course, it's not like you need to plan everything out like it's a tour guide for like the entire fucking weekend. But something that you've intended on doing for a couple of hours can actually work out pretty well if you decide to set a plan. Now, of course, the caveats that do come with it are you have to choose something that's supposedly going to be fun for the both of you. And unfortunately, there's not that many guys that know of things that can be fun or can think up things that can be fun for the both of you on a whim. Because over time, and I am going to get into this in the main topic, a lot of people have stopped dating or have taken a more laissez-faire approach to dating, if I can call it that. And because it's a little bit more freestyle and guys aren't putting in as much effort, there's not a lot of transfer of information in terms of how to date appropriately. So there's a lot of young guys that do not know how to take women out on dates beyond just the typical dinner and maybe a movie, or just a movie or just dinner. So there's a lot of guys that will end up setting up plans for stuff that will appeal to them but not to the woman. So if you guys are going to watch a movie, it'll be a movie that's like super action and, like a lot of bloody gore and a guy looking like he's the G, or like some 007 type shit, which might not appeal to women. Yet in reality, he was supposed to look for something that would appeal to the woman. Or, he ends up taking her out on a date and they go and watch a football match, or they go to a bar, which may not really appeal to the woman. And unfortunately, even though you plan for stuff like that as a guy, it might not work out as well. One of the problems with this whole, do this and you'll seem more attractive, is that there's usually certain conditions that you need to take care of. And in this case, it's making sure that if you're going to set a plan that can work for the both of you, and probably include maybe a little bit of wiggle room to adjust the plan so that it can be nice for her as well. And hopefully, everything should go pretty smoothly, provided that you found something that was particularly neutral or just fun for the both of you. Because at the end of the day, if you can show that you know how to plan and that you stick to a plan and that you're really good at planning, it does show that you're a lot better as a stable partner as opposed to just a fun partner, which can make you seem a lot better as a date, especially if she's doing multiple dates with multiple different guys and she's not sure which is which. Although granted, there are other things that can make you seem a little bit more attractive within the date, which I am going to get into, but starting out with having a particularly good plan with a little bit of wiggle room to make it great for the both of you is actually something that will put you ahead of quite a number of guys, especially today in the dating market. But then again, I could be wrong about this shit because I don't have a vagina, so I can't be too sure if it appeals to women. So I'm just gonna leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. Now, if there's one thing that I've altered my mindset and my opinions on in this podcast since the moment I started back in July of 2019, it's the idea of dating. I have spoken for it, I have spoken against it. I have thrown in Netflix and chill as a better alternative for it and defended it. I have spoken about do's and don'ts. I have talked about why splitting the bill is a good idea. I've spoken about why it's not the most optimal idea for some people. I've spoken about dates not being beneficial to men, but I've also spoken about why dating is actually important for both men and women. And, with all these things that I've said, I've altered my stances multiple different times. And my thought points on it have actually changed, sometimes going on a little bit more of a liberal side as opposed to a more, conservative or traditional or old school side of things. But all in all, at the end of the day, the goal is still the same. You want a partner, this person that you're going on a date with is a potential partner, and you're going to see if this potential is actually worth working with towards getting into an actual relationship or worth dating or possibly even marrying. And interestingly enough, one of the things that doesn't get spoken about as much, but is actually possibly even more important than a lot of the other things that are spoken about in the name of, when you're going on a date, you should do this or you shouldn't do that, is actually communication. And a lot of that is experienced through things like small talk, things like your ability to hold a conversation and so on. And I can remember sometime in the back half of last year, I was actually talking about how there's a lot of guys today, in this day and age, that are unable to hold a conversation with the opposite sex. Or, even just in general, there's a lot of guys that are unable to hold an actual conversation, and how you having the ability to hold a conversation, have a particularly wide range of topics to discuss, does actually put you further ahead. And normally I tend to leave it at that because usually there's not too much to add on to it, but I've never really spoken about why guys haven't been very pro-date and why that's kind of decreased, our desire to be very conversational. Up until I saw this post on Reddit where a woman was actually talking about it. And I'm going to read the post for you because she kind of goes into detail about this entire thing. So she says, and I quote, "I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday night, and I think it sums up the whys and whatnots. He asked me if I would ever date seriously, and I said yes, but there's a problem. I get bored in the talking stages real fast because with my generation, some men will take you on a first date, then ask you to meet in their houses the second time expecting sex, or there are others that will outright invite you to their houses for a first date, and to be honest, once I hear come visit me, I delete that number and go about my life. Dating is hard because no one really cares to get to know the other person, just meeting and knacking and moving on. I realized anytime a guy figures out I'm not giving up my body, he won't entertain me for 10 minutes, and quite frankly, I like that. Saves us a lot of time and pretense. Anyways, nowadays sex is the easiest thing to find out here. Like literally. A genuine connection and growth between two people has become a golden experience. One that, if you find it, you're the luckiest human beings to ever exist. Finally, I believe we were placed on this earth to love, but people turned it into a commodity, and so we end up with a rotten society. It would be nice to go back to the days where men found pride in courting women and being intentional with them, and women, out of feeling love, just take care of their men and love them unconditionally. But maybe not on this earth, maybe in another one. In the meantime, let's deal with the consequences of our actions. End quote. Now, at the end of the day, one of the things that I think just comes out of all of this, yes, there's the whole getting to know each other, but a lot of that is very based on conversation. It's not like you'll go there and you'll ask, oh, what are your preferences? Oh, do you like this? Do you like that? Nah, it's just gonna sound like an interview. A lot of that is usually dived into and spoken about whenever people have some sort of communication and some sort of conversation when it comes to dates and actually, dating and shit. And, it kind of makes it seem as though guys nowadays mostly just want to bang and, they don't pay attention to women and they don't usually care. And that's not entirely the case. Yes, are there guys that do that? Yes. Are there a lot of guys that do that? Yes. But there's more to the whole story about guys doing that, and a lot of it actually has to do with how a lot of women have been behaving, and I want to try and explain both and sort of explain why we may have the same goal, but because we have different methods of doing it, we are going to be left moving in the opposite directions of each other. And to start things off, I'm going to start by talking about the first comment that I saw on this entire post, because it sort of summarizes what a lot of guys feel about dates today. So the commenter said, and I quote, "Talking stage is nonsense and a waste of time. Last time I did that shit, I ended up spending money on dates for a chick to tell me that she just doesn't feel the vibe. I was counting all the money on stupid dates spent, me na hii uzee yangu, and the girl was like, and we can just be friends. You know what? I'm good." End quote. Now, this actually summarizes a problem that a lot of guys have had with going out on dates over the past couple of years. Because a lot of guys have been noticing that a lot of women have been using men for dates just to try out free food, get a new experience, and sometimes even save up on spending their money on their own food. And there's a story that recently came out about this, where some woman was busy talking about how she went on 6 dates every single week and she saved up, thousands on groceries. And, that's just typically using a bunch of different guys just to go out on dates. Also, there's a new statistic that recently came out, I think it was around 2019, which showed that 1 in 3 women go out on dates for the food. So to think that, I should take this girl out on dates, and especially considering that as men we're expected to cover the bill, so we're not splitting it, I'm pretty much going to handle someone's meal and, pay for someone's experience just because they want to experience it, not necessarily because they want to be with me. And that's something that a lot of guys sort of felt some way about. And a lot of guys here in Kenya decided to opt for the whole, let's cut out most of the cost. Since I'm not going to try and, ask for us to split the bill, I might as well just have the babe come to my place. I can whip up a nice meal and we can chill. And if things get hot and heavy, we won't have to waste a bunch of time between the place where we had gone for the date and the house. I'll just lay some pipe. And, it seems to make sense for a lot of guys. Plus, there's also a bunch of guys that don't really know how to take a babe out on a date, but they know that if they can get them to the house, they can probably be persuasive enough that they can get her to give up the cookie. So a lot of guys today want to play on this entire thing, and I can see where the sense is at. If I'm just going to be used for a free meal, then why the hell should I bother? I might as well find a way to get around the whole thing and get something that I want, because you're getting something that you want as well. So I don't mind giving you a free meal, but hey, let me lay some pipe. And that leads on to a lot of women who don't like dating today, because there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of great potential guys that are asking for women to come to their houses, and these women know that there's a pretty good chance these guys are going to try and want to shag even before anything substantial in the name of conversation comes up. Also, it's not like there's that many guys that have the best culinary skills, so if you're going to his place, there's a pretty good chance the guy is just going to want to lay pipe. And because you're at his place, you don't know what the hell's going to happen. You can't entirely trust a stranger in their own home by taking yourself there and expecting that you'll be fully taken care of and there's nothing to worry about. So, granted, I can also understand why women don't like dating today, because there's a lot of guys that are just trying to shag, and you can't necessarily separate the ones who are trying to shag from the ones who aren't just trying to shag and they want something serious, because at the end of the day, both of them are trying to take you out on a date by having you come to their place pretty much the same way. And I can see where the lack of understanding is in that as well. And I can understand why a lot of them usually talk about how they miss the old school days where men wanted to take you on a date and they were super intentional, blah, blah, blah. But the reality of it is that's been spoiled by some women, and as a result, some men just, decided to tell the rest that, there's a bunch of babes that are doing this shit, so we've just stopped putting the effort altogether. Because why the hell would I put in effort, spend my money just for someone to go and get a free meal, yet they may not necessarily be interested in me? So, there's complete sense around that. But now the unfortunate reality is, I think there's a shit ton of us that probably do need to go out on dates. Not necessarily just because, some of you people just want to try and shag the babe or anything of that sort. It's just, there's a lot of you that barely know fuck all about the person that you want to be in a relationship with. You go, you see them, they're good looking, and I'm speaking to the guys here. You go, you see this person, they're good looking, and you want to get to know them better, but you don't know how shallow or how deep she is. And I'm talking about, her ideas on shit or her attitude and mentality. You don't know how great of a personality she has. You don't know if, she has any lingering traumas there. All you know is this is a good looking person, and yes, maybe you've traded a couple of texts and you guys seem interested in each other, but you don't know if you being interested in this person means that they're going to be a good potential mate. So even without knowing anything much about this babe, you going straight into it and doing it with this person doesn't necessarily mean that you guys are going to have a great relationship. Yes, maybe you lay pipe, but at the end of the day, if it's pipe that you wanted to lay, I'm sure there's a lot of other options you'd have had, or at least that's what I think. So maybe we need to start redoing dates a little bit. Maybe we need to bring some sort of equality to it, if I can call it that. Because if both sides go in and put in some level of observable input, I do think that maybe we can actually sort of streamline this whole dating mess that's out here. Because we're actually at an impasse. Because there's guys that want to go out on dates, or at least there's guys that want to date with the lowest amount of risk and the lowest amount of input. And there's women who don't want to give up on the dating market, but they want to separate the wheat from the chaff. They want the high quality, the intentional, and the desirable best potential guys, as opposed to the guys that want to lay pipe. So to find that midpoint, I decided to think about the things that people can do out on dates besides just the typical go sit at a restaurant, talk and eat. And I figured, you know what? The same fun activities thing that I was busy talking about initially when I was doing the whole rant about planning, maybe you can just take that and implement that here. But you throw in an extra twist by making the woman give some sort of input to sort of bring her in on the entire thing. So for example, if you guys decide to do bowling, and this one's just, a shot in the dark. If this guy is going to handle the games and you guys are going to have fun, let her deal with snacks, because it's not like you guys will just play bowling and, not consume anything. Or if you guys are trying out a fun game like mini golf, maybe you guys can do 2 games and she'll pay for one, you pay for the other. Like at the end of it, if you can find some way to have the women bring in some level of input so that the guys don't feel like they're being taken advantage of, then maybe more guys can start being a little bit more open to the idea of going out on dates. Because the moment that happens, then guys now also have to put in a little bit more effort in terms of being good at conversation, because you're definitely going to have to talk to this person. And the more you guys relate, the more you guys will communicate better, the better it'll be for the vast majority of women and men that are trying to find someone potential and don't want to deal with a lot of the chaff as opposed to the wheat. So to kind of conclude all of this, I believe that the only way that we can actually rescue the date from becoming an obsolete thing is by actually redoing the whole idea of a date to a point where both sides have an input and both sides are expected to show up in one way or another. Because either side is going to continue complaining about how the current dating market is and why going on dates is a bad idea because people aren't doing this or people aren't giving that. And we're going to continue staying at this impasse up until something changes. So if one side actually does start to step up and the other side decides to step up as well, maybe we might actually cross this impasse and actually get to a point of an understanding. Although then again, I might actually be wrong about this shit, and I have zero idea because maybe I need to go on more dates. But either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.